Hi, everyone. I see that you're enjoying your lunches, so please do go ahead with that. And those of you that are joining online, thank you for joining on this really important topic. I think I've been working in the refugee sector since 1994. And at the time, when I was working mainly in war zones in the beginning, we didn't know what vicarious trauma was. We just assumed it was part of the job to feel depressed, to have PTSD, to try to deal with things as they happened. After about 9 years of working in back-to-back war zones, I took 4 months off because I was severely depressed and I was having very difficult times in dealing with everything and sleeping and eating. And at that point, there was still not much emphasis on mental health in the humanitarian sector and the development sector. Since then, thankfully, I think that some of the taboo has been lifted, and I think that what we are trying to do is to establish that while we are protecting the dignity, the health, the physical and mental health of those people that we're working with in communities, in conflict, in crisis, that we also are trying more and more to safeguard our own health and well-being. I recently, 2 years ago, became the head of global communications for UNHCR, and one of the things I decided to do was to tackle head-on some of the issues that we have been loath to do in some of the larger organizations like UN agencies. And I have piloted, together with colleagues from our mental health and staff welfare team, a pilot project that I hope to actually make public to anybody who needs it, that deals with how to identify and mitigate vicarious trauma for practitioners that are working particularly in communications. So I think one is just, what is vicarious trauma? It's basically when you are working in a sector. It could be with journalism, it can be with social work, it can definitely be in development work and humanitarian work, where you are empathetically engaging with the people that you're working with and trying to serve, and you are also having some trauma from it. It can lead to harmful physical, emotional, and mental changes, a lot of behavioral issues, a lot of issues. I have a lot of friends and colleagues who were very heavily into substance abuse, into other dangerous behavioral practices, just to try to deal with the stress. I think many of us try to self-medicate, we try to deal with the trauma as best as we can, but often what we need is to deal with not only the root cause, but also to have some positive mental health support. So, how does it happen? Many of us are hearing firsthand stories of violence, abuse, tragedy, crisis, war, persecution, gender-based violence, human rights violations, the list goes on and on. So it's really about how telling these stories or witnessing these stories can lead to, of course, the professional impacts, but also the personal ones that you're dealing with. The issue is also that identity is never neutral. So what I mean by that is that you can self-identify, but you can also acknowledge and recognize what you're hearing from the people that you are working with and talking to on a day-to-day basis. Some of the things that we've also taken into account recently, and in UNHCR, I'm really proud to say that we're one of the UN agencies that now is coming up with an ethical guidelines for communications. So we're relooking entirely our approach to and the way that we're gathering consent from people. So do people genuinely know the stories that they're sharing, how we're going to portray them, or how they are going to portray themselves, and what platforms? So recently when I was in Poland, Hungary, Moldova, and Romania 2 weeks into the invasion of Ukraine, and I met with people who, for the first time, I really saw in my nearly 30-year career that people did not want to be on film, understandably so, because they still had family members back home, and they didn't know what was happening. Some of the families that I did meet said, yes, I'm very happy for you to mention me to show my picture on your website, but not on Facebook. So these issues of consent are ones that we're taking seriously, but it also impacts the trauma and the secondary trauma that you may also be sharing, not only with yourself, but with your audiences as well. That, of course, leads into the trust relationship that you have with the people that you're working with, but also with your audiences, to make sure not only through trigger warnings, but also credible, transparent, accountable storytelling. And then obviously the dignified portrayal and the safety, which is underwriting everything that we do, and should really be the main and only driver that determines whether or not we share a particular piece of news, an event, an account, a testimony, or a story. So we have a lot of burnout risk factors in the work that we do. We're all purpose-driven. I think every one of us really believes in what we're doing. We want to make an impact. We want to do good. So that means that you're committed and you push yourself sometimes past a point that is healthy, or that you even recognize because everybody else around you is doing it. The overtime issue has gone into overload during COVID. I just found that, when we were working virtually, and the reason that we started this pilot project now is that what I noticed was a lot of my colleagues, particularly junior colleagues who were isolated and living on their own, for example, in a small studio apartment, did not have friends or family near them, and were going through and analyzing stories or sharing all of these stories. I had one colleague who I actually noticed signs of depression, because he was the one that was the focal point for looking at all of the stories of gender-based violence that was coming out of Ethiopia. So I took him aside virtually, and I was just asking him, are you okay? Like, what is going on? And then he did say, I feel bad to even mention it, but I'm having a hard time sleeping. I'm really not able to concentrate. I feel really depressed. I feel angry. I feel isolated. And so I think what happens is that we are so closely identifying with the work and the purpose of our work that sometimes it's hard for us to separate from what may be impacting our ability to work on this, because we're being so negatively affected by some of the stories and some of the accounts that we are hearing firsthand. Oftentimes also there's an unclear job expectation. I actually talked to one of my colleagues recently who, she was just burning the midnight oil. And she's a working mom. I was getting emails from her at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. She works in the social media team. And so I said to her, you've got to slow down a little bit. I've been very mindful of that and actively telling colleagues to, turn off, please don't send emails, please don't work past normal hours. And what she said was, but, I need to get this tweet out. This event just happened. I said, events are going to happen. Crises are going to happen every single day. I can guarantee you that 6 months from now, you're not going to remember whether or not that tweet went out, but you will remember if you didn't get enough sleep and you burnt out and you didn't see your kids for 3 days because of it. Of course, our work is important, but it's also important that we make sure that we're protecting ourselves so that we can keep doing the work sustainably. You're trying to be everything to everyone. This is something that I feel like many of us are trying our hardest to make sure that we're able to tell stories, to advocate, to be an activist, to be a manager, to be a leader, to be a parent, to be a wife, to be a daughter, all of these things. And they've really been exacerbated under COVID, where oftentimes we're so separated from the people that we love or that we work with that we are overcompensating by working even longer hours, being accessible all the time. I feel like now, even though many of us are back in the offices, we're still working from like 6:37 in the morning until whatever time at night, because we got used to all of these virtual meetings. So really all of these things create more of the dysfunction at work, which then makes you susceptible to the vicarious trauma that you may be exposed to. There are some very common warning signs. There are physical ones, behavioral ones, and emotional ones. Has anybody felt any of these in the work that you've been doing? Yes, absolutely. So the first step in that is recognizing, is identifying when you're starting to not only feel, but also actually notice some of these changes in your behavior, in your outlook, in your own well-being. So how do you? So the first, as I said, is self-observation. The second one, and I know this, a lot of people say, just do yoga, just meditate, blah, blah, blah. I actually do both. I found both yoga and meditation when I was working in Rwanda just after the genocide. It's been the thing that I have to do it every day, no matter where I am, because it's the thing that grounds me. But other people have other things. Some of the friends that I worked with in Rwanda, they found running. They found, crafting. They found whatever it is that helps you to completely detach and to do something that just serves your own emotional and mental well-being. Rest and recovery. I know we all say it, but the importance of being able to fully unplug and to take some time and to get sufficient sleep. These are all kind of basics, but a lot of times we don't do the basics. Managing expectations. That's for your teams. That's for the people that we're serving. That's for your organization as a whole. Balancing work projects so that you're not just exposing yourself to these stories. Maybe there's a passion project or a hope-based project that you can work on to balance from some of the more negative or some of the more triggering ones. Talking to your family, friends, and being open about where you are. And funny enough, the research has shown that the single most important thing that helps in dealing with vicarious trauma is your support network at work. Because these are the people that are also being exposed and that are also understanding of what you're going through, and you can help each other. The water cooler talks that we've been missing for the last 2 years, they make a huge difference. When you're able to say, gosh, that story that we did on the woman from Afghanistan, that really just got me so down, and you're able to talk about it, that also helps you to process and to deal with it. So in closing, what I would say is I know that it's very, very tempting for us to just keep going, keep working, because the work that we do is really important. And it's the only way forward. At UNHCR right now, and I've been working at UNHCR since 1997, we have more active emergencies, 40 active emergencies, than I've ever seen. And the worst part is that there are fewer solutions. Fewer people are able to go back home. Fewer people are being resettled. Fewer people are being locally integrated. I just came, last week I was in the Darien Gap in Panama, and then I went through Guatemala and Mexico and met with asylum seekers and refugees and people forced to flee. The stories that I heard along the way are absolutely heartbreaking. I also made sure that while I was doing the work, I took time to have a good meal, to talk to friends, to go to a museum in Mexico City, because the balance, I know, is so important. And what I'm also trying to do with everyone that I'm working with in my teams and across UNHCR is to, one, show that it's okay if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, and that we should be able to talk about these issues openly. It is not a liability to be vulnerable and to have challenges in the work that we're doing. What I have said, I'm just going to wait 1 second. Make sure you get your registration tags. Okay, so I wanted to wait because I think this one is important. I think when we get to the point where we're not emotionally, mentally, physically impacted by the work that we're doing, maybe that's a sign that we shouldn't be doing it any longer. So it's normal and it's to be expected. The question is, how do we make sure that we normalize also the negative impacts and we make sure that the support is there amongst ourselves, but also within mental health support and resources. So thank you very much.